Okay, so before the Welcome to Puzzle with Emilia. That's me, and it has been some time since I last posted anything on YouTube because unfortunately I have been in a hospital condition for several weeks, but now I'm feeling a little bit better, and as the registration opened just this week for the World Jigsaw Puzzle Championships 2024, I really wanted to do a video with more advanced tips on how to practice for the speed puzzling competition. As usual, I have this little boy running around the house, so if you feel you hear some paw steps going around, it's just my dog. But let's not let that bother us. Anyway, if you have not seen my first tip video that I posted, I think somewhere in the summer, one of my first videos, I really recommend to go watch that first because it has more like the base, more important stuff, the bigger picture for how to practice for the speed puzzling. And also I most likely will reference to that video multiple times in this video. So if you haven't watched it yet, go and check it out and then come back. Today I will have you 7 new tips in total. The first 4 are going to be more like advanced tweaks, if you would say, that you may want to consider with your practice. Because as one of the greatest artists have also said, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. And then the last 3 tips will be more bigger in a sense that we're going to talk about how to excel your skill set by separating each skill to practice alone, as well how to track your development, and especially if you feel like you may be slowing down or even question yourself like, am I developing or not? Because at least I do that, and I can guarantee you that even the best of the best question themselves quite often. It's very normal for us. But other than that, let's move on to the tips. Let's go. Tip number 1, or this is actually a question. So, what is your left hand doing when you speed puzzle? Or could you actually even say the percentage of how much it's participating in the whole process? If you're like me, many others, you most likely honestly have no idea. But you probably still have like a very well-educated guess on what is your left hand doing. Of course, if you are left-handed, you need to imagine this scenario the other way around. But I'm talking about your weaker hand. Because your left hand can be actually very beneficial. But before you can start utilizing it better, you actually have to know what is it doing already, if any. So film yourself or go check your old videos if you have already done that earlier. And focus on the left hand. What is it doing? Is it just following? For example, to me, when I realized this, that, oh, I have a left hand, I should probably pay attention to it. And I was watching my videos, I just kind of like, it kind of looks like it's doing something, but honestly, it's mostly just shadowing. And when you know, here's some ideas. Your left hand could be helping you flipping the pieces. It could be a lot of help with the sorting or picking up the right pieces. It could be very beneficial in the end just to smash those last pieces with both hands in. But bear in mind, I'm not here suggesting that you should use your both hands 50-50. Because honestly, that doesn't make sense, and that would probably make it even harder for you. But there's a lot of like small things. Don't go overboard, because it's actually really hard to do different tasks, especially different tasks with your both hands at the same time. I can promise you this. If you lift your hands halfway up, and then you start drawing a circle with your right hand, and then you start doing a square with your left hand, try to do this at the same time. Like that's my point. It doesn't work. So don't go overboard, just little tweaks. Tip number 2, flipping the pieces. So I think 2 most asked questions are like, what is a good time for flipping the pieces and what are the best techniques for it? So instead of just sharing my own tips, I actually spend a lot of time analyzing the old live videos from the World Jigsaw Puzzle Federation's channel, trying to catch some information from there, and then I also ask from my Instagram followers about their times. So let's talk about the time first. I've heard this like a crazy rumor spreading around that the best ones would actually flip all the pieces in like 2 minutes. So I did my analysis and I kind of found this to be a little bit untrue. I don't have like too much data collected because while I was watching the live videos, it was really hard to find the exact times when people finish flipping the pieces because they kind of tend to move the camera to the commentary booth between the times from 2 minutes to 4 minutes, so you're gonna miss that phase miserably. But I did catch some interesting moments that I'm gonna share with you. So here we have the current world champion Alejandro on his first qualification round this year, and you can see here the time stamp is 2:48. The camera moves to the commentary booth once again after this, but I can see that he is actually starting to still flip the edge pieces. And this was actually very interesting to see because I know many people sort the edge pieces, but I didn't know Alejandro is also doing that because I personally don't do it. Now I'm like thinking maybe I should. But yeah, he still starts doing those. We don't see the exact time when he finished the flipping, but we can say for sure it's definitely more 3 minutes than even near of 2 minutes. And then I did get like some moments from the final round. So here you can see Alejandro again, the time stamp is 2:18 and he's not finished yet. And then when we look at the other like highly ranked speed puzzlers, we have Mercedes, I hope I'm pronouncing it at least somewhere close to correctly. Here at 1:56, and it looks like it's almost like half still left. Then we have Sarah, almost 2.5 and still flipping pieces. And when I asked for my Instagram followers, the times kind of like went from 2.5 minutes up to 15 minutes. Of course, there's a lot of different kind of puzzlers over there. But I would say pretty much the average was 5 minutes if we include those people who also said that they do more extensive sorting while they flip. So just for the flipping or maybe taking also the edges to the side is average 5 minutes based on those sensors. I would say that, you know, whatever your time is, and by the way, if you don't know, film yourself or time yourself so you know what you're working with and set a goal based on that. But if you are already flipping the pieces in 3 minutes, then you most likely don't want to like really pay too much attention practicing on it because you're not gonna cut down too many seconds, maybe like half a minute at max. As said, I did not find anyone who would be able to flip the pieces in 2 minutes. So if you have heard that rumor, we can just, I think, throw it to the trash, because if you're doing it in 3 minutes, you're already in the speed of a world champion. And then a couple tips on the technique. So I checked myself on the videos and I actually do flip in 3 minutes. This is kind of relief for me because I somehow thought I'm slow. 4 minutes if I also do sorting with the edges only. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm fast. But anyway, what was a game changer for me, because obviously I have not been this fast. People who know me, I hate flipping. It's the worst part of doing a puzzle. But Game changer for me when I realized that actually when I flip pieces, instead of like flipping one by one, I just flip like a bunch of pieces. And I actually also saw on the video that Alejandro does the same. It has one downside, which is that sometimes you flip the pieces that were already like the right side up, so you kind of like need to double flip some pieces. But in general, this feels like the best strategy. And then I also use a lot of my left hand. I would even say that for the flipping phase, it's kind of like 50-50. Everything is just flipping the pieces, both hands. Oh, and also one point I wanted to make, because I heard that people practice flipping in a way that they first flip all the pieces upside down, and then they kind of like take time for flipping all the pieces. But I would not recommend that, because it's not really the same, because what actually makes the flipping so hard is that there is like mixed of pieces that are already the right side up and then the ones that are like upside down. So it doesn't make sense to me, if you understand what I mean, that you would flip all them, because then you can literally just flip everything. But it's more like, you know what I mean. I'm just not recommending that. Tip number 3. Space management, my personal biggest enemy, that I have done some improvements, thank God, over the months. But let's start from kind of like from the beginning. So how is it related to the flipping? So it does kind of matter where do you flip your pieces. If you have watched my shorts or my TikTok videos, you may have noticed that when I flip pieces, I keep pushing them to the same direction. So I have like kind of like big empty space, and then I have the pile, and then I make also sure that I will have already space in a logical placement to start building after I flipped all those pieces. And also, so this is kind of like space management slash placement, I guess, on the area that you're building the puzzle on. So also what is important to me is that where do you put the reference image? So I kind of want that the reference image and the pieces are on the same side or same direction, because the issue is that if you, let's say your reference image is here and here's your flipped pieces. So what kind of happens? You want to look at the picture. Okay, there's the picture. You want to look at the pieces. Okay, they're here. So it would be easier if the image is also here where the pieces are. So because it doesn't matter whether you're looking at the pieces or you're looking at the image, you're kind of at least subconsciously. What's the word? You know, in the back of your mind, that one. I'm not gonna Google how to pronounce it. Whatever. So if they're in the same direction, you kind of see them both, no matter which ones are you actually actively looking at. So I feel like if they're on the other different sides, you kind of go into this owl mode a little bit, even if you're not using too much the reference image, because I know there's people who really don't look at it that much. But I think it's better if they're on the same side for this reason. And then, of course, the other thing is that you always need to make sure you have enough space. You want to avoid the situations where you need to keep moving the pieces and spending time on that because you don't have enough space to build. So I think mostly this happens for me personally when I've already done something, maybe even the edges and some parts, and I start collecting like specific pieces and I put them into the middle, and then I realize I'm not for example, some reason like not ready to build that section yet, or unable for some reason. Or there's also other reasons why you start collecting pieces in the middle of your puzzle, and especially when you go towards the end, they take so much space. And it happens, at least to me, so much that I need to start moving them to the side at one point to actually have space to build the puzzle. So that's like a big no-no. And sometimes I also have issues that I don't have like this, like a center empty space. So I kind of build there and I kind of build there, and then when I want to put those puzzle islands together, I have so much pieces on the way. I need to start moving them again so I can actually connect those big islands together. So that's definitely one thing. And then one more point is that we all know the Federation, for example, for the world, they actually publish what is the size of the table. So there's a little bit of risk that if you're at home and you're practicing with a big table or something and you're used to a more space, and especially on the situation, I wasn't that good. So in the semifinals and finals, I was actually sitting like sharing a table with somebody else. And even though it was kind of like the space, but then you also have like water bottles and stuff, it makes it even smaller. So what do I recommend? Check out those measurements, but also put yourself a smaller space. So smaller than what the measurements are. So practice doing a puzzle with a smaller space, because the harder you make it for yourself while you practice, and then you have even a little bit more space in the actual competition, it feels much, much, much easier rather than if you would have just practiced with the exact measures. So tip number 4, am I recording? Yes, I'm recording. Which is your fine motor skills. This might go a little bit off the track because I didn't really have a script in my mind for this part. But to be honest, fine motor skills, kind of like how fast and how your like fingers are working, you know. The thing is that when we talk about being like super fast, speed, flipping the pieces fast, everything kind of like that, it requires that you have very good fine motor skills. As said, most of us, our weaker hand has less those skills. If you have heard me referencing to piano players in one of my challenge videos when I was talking about practicing on your speed, then you know piano players also, like even if they're good players, they know the notes and stuff, they actually have this kind of like apps and everything that they practice for the fine motor skills, so they're able to play better. Because sometimes it's honestly not, for example, the fact that you're just slow at doing the puzzle, like from the cognitive side. It might be also at some point that you're just physically not able to be that fast, for example. And that's why I always say that if you want to practice your speed, do it with the smaller puzzles, so you get actually the feeling of what is the speed, because the puzzle is easier. So you will be able to practice actually your fine motor skills with that as well, because if you don't achieve that speed with the bigger puzzle, then you don't actually get the practice for the speed. And this is where I have one full section on that older video talking about it, and I have a little bit more tips on that. So for example, the issue with the most smaller puzzles is that the pieces are not the regular size, they're kind of like bigger, which is actually meant specifically for kids and older people who are having a little bit more harder time to grab those smaller pieces, the regular size pieces. So how you may want to advance this speed practice with the small puzzles is that you actually take, for example, well, maybe this is not the best example. I actually have a perfect example for you. I mentioned this in one of my recap videos, but for example, this is kind of perfect puzzle because you can make this as a whole and then you separate it. So you take like these little stripes, and then you have those smaller puzzles that you can practice the speed with. Obviously, this would work with any puzzle. You just need to make the puzzle first and then separate some areas. So then you can actually practice the speed with a smaller puzzle with the regular size piece, because it's important to kind of like have the right touch and feel. And also this is also a reason why right before any competition, I actually practice only with the puzzle brand that is chosen for the competition. It's usually Ravensburger, just for the reason that, you know, every brand has a little bit different, I feel like I want to say texture, but that's not exactly the right English word that I'm looking for. They kind of like have a different feel. It's important to practice with kind of like different feeling puzzles, as said. But before a competition, I usually make sure that the last puzzles I've done before the competition are with the same brand, so I have the exact feel. And basically with any of these 4 little tips, before we move on to the bigger stuff, the thing is that you actually need to actively think about them when you do something, because it's so easy to be like, before you start the puzzle, like, okay, now I'm gonna like remember the left hand, but I swear to God, when you start, you forget it immediately, because if the starting situation is that you don't really utilize the left hand, then that's kind of like your normal mode. And you know, speed puzzling is quite intense, so when you get into it, you don't really think too much. Of course, this depends a little bit based on an individual, but most likely you will forget it, and then you will remember it like right after you finish the puzzle. You're like, oh, I forgot to utilize the left hand, or I was like, I really wanted to do my 100% on the flipping, but I probably slowed down, because even like giving you 100%, it's hard. It requires that you're actively thinking about it, because we just tend to like kind of like go to the calmer, slow down mode. It's really hard to keep that like intense mode for the whole puzzle. So I'm always saying that anything you practice, anything you want to implement on what you're doing, you really need to actively think about it. So if you don't remember it, like write it on your hand or something that you will see while you're doing it, so you can actually practice it. It's kind of like the saying that, you know, you do a grocery list and then you're in the store and you're like, yeah, I remember everything, which you most likely do. You leave the store, you drive back home and you're like, oh, I forgot the milk. I forgot the toilet paper. Because, you know, it just happens. Because we're so in the moment, which is a wonderful thing. But when you really want to implement something new, you really have to think about it actively. Otherwise, you will just forget it. Believe me, happens to me all the time. I already talked about using the left hand in the puzzle podcast like months ago, and it still took me like multiple weeks that I actually remember it. Every time I was like, okay, the left hand, I finished the puzzle, oh, the left hand. Ugh. So, really. But let's move on to the bigger things. Okay, so before the tip 5 and 6, I just want to tell you something that it's related to them both. So speed puzzling is more like a skill set rather than one skill. You kind of need multiple skills, and we all use them at the same time, multiple different kind of skills when we speed puzzle. Of course, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but imagine if you could be best at each skill there is in this kind of like a speed puzzling skill set. Well, obviously it's not possible to be best at everything, right? But we can still separately practice each of these skills. But that said, when we speed puzzle, we use multiple skills. So it's kind of like impossible to do practice each skill how we normally would do speed puzzling. So it takes a little bit creativity to actually separately practice these skills. And separately is the key word here. Tip number 5, or is it better this way? So, this is a skill that you may want to practice separately, which is doing the puzzle without the image at all. And as said, we need to do this as separate as possible. You know, it's like when you go to the gym and you do like a burpees, which is good for your whole body, but then you want to also work out some muscles in an isolated way. So that's what we need to do. We need to isolate the skill as the best we can. So doing a puzzle without the reference image, the best way to do this is to ask your friend or spouse or relative, whoever, your neighbor, to buy you puzzles and then take the pieces out of the box and actually never show you the reference image. So you have like no access to the original box until you actually finished the puzzle. If you're not the best puzzler yet or you feel a little bit too uncomfortable with this, then I recommend you start with the smaller puzzles. Once again, smaller puzzles are great for any practice. And if you're already super good or you have never done this, I think most people have never actually done it completely this way. But if you're really good and you can do it also with the bigger puzzle, that's no problem, because now once again, it's not about practicing the speed puzzling as whole, it's practicing just this skill. So without the reference image at all, the best way to do it, ask somebody's completely new puzzle, you have never seen it in your entire life. Even better if they choose something maybe a little bit rare puzzle, so you haven't even seen it in the catalog, because I know, you follow this puzzle community on Instagram and everything, you've seen basically every puzzle in the whole world. So that's one skill that will really make you better. Let's move on to the next tip, which is quite opposite. Tip number 6. Another important skill that I've recognized is doing the puzzle only with the reference image. And now you're like, okay, what do you mean? Like, okay, you just do a normal speed puzzling and you have the reference image. No. This is actually a little bit more painful practice, which is that you will have the reference image stuck in your face, basically. You don't do flipping, you don't do sorting. You have your pieces in a pile or in a box or whatsoever, and you just start taking a random piece. Don't choose it, don't look, just take a random piece. Look at the image and put it in the right place. This is very painful practice. This takes a patience. Once again, if patience is not enough, start with the smaller puzzles. But basically, this is the skill that makes you better at recognizing each piece. Where is it in the picture? So, as said, this is quite opposite skill from the previous tip I gave you. But imagine if you have these both skills better than anybody else. And you have these both skills and you have all the other skills and you develop different kind of things, then this is actually a really wonderful practice. But I think at this point you may understand why I said that the key word is separately. Because you cannot really, you can kind of do the normal speed puzzling and be like, okay, now I'm looking at the picture, or having some puzzle you bought earlier and okay, I'm gonna hide the reference image or whatsoever. But when you really separate these skills, it has such a room to actually develop. It's kind of like, if you're an Olympic swimmer or something, you don't just go and swim all the time. Like, you practice the movement, you go to a physiotherapist to focus on one little movement, and then when all this accumulates together, you're like a super good in the end. So, and you can do this with any skill that you can think of. So if you have in mind something like very like a big skill that it's part of the speed puzzling skill set, please comment below. And then we can think about, okay, how can you separate this and practice this alone? That would be amazing. So comment if you have something in mind. But now let's move on to my last tip. As I said in the beginning of this video is more advanced tips. So please start from my earlier video with those tips that are more like baseline and more important in the bigger picture, and then move on to these tweaks and different kind of skills. But if you're already rather fast speed puzzler, or you feel like you're not developing, then tip number 7 comes here, which is related to your development. Because I heard a lot of people who are already doing rather good, also myself, because it was kind of like crazy when I started last year, and I was doing 500-piece puzzle like in 2 hours, but now my average time is pretty much almost under an hour. So it's really hard for me to nowadays, because different puzzles take different times. So I'm kind of like, am I developing anymore? Because the difference is getting much smaller, because there is not that much room anymore. Like, it's easy to go, like, not easy, but you understand what I mean. When you have this like a 2-hour average, it's easy to take like, okay, develop and take 15 minutes out of it, 5 minutes out of it. When you're doing a puzzle in less than an hour, it's kind of like 2 minutes there and there, but when a different puzzle takes a different time, it kind of looks sometimes like I'm not developing at all. And I heard multiple people actually feeling this way, kind of like questioning, am I developing or not? So here's my tip, because if you're already tracking your times, at least for the 500-piece puzzles, what about speed puzzling a 1000-piece puzzle? And this is now, I'm not talking about the same thing as I talk on my older video about practicing your patience by doing bigger puzzles. But now I'm actually talking about like a full mode speed puzzling a 1000-piece puzzle. Because if you're already doing the smaller puzzle in quite short time, then this is not like completely painful thing. Of course, if you're still like a slow puzzler, keep doing maybe those 500s for the speed puzzling. Especially if you're like 1000-piece puzzles take, let's say, over 5 hours. But if you think you can do them like 3 hours, even less, 4 hours, then I think this would be good for you. Because when you start tracking your development with those 1000-piece puzzles as a speed puzzling, the difference is much more, because there's a little bit more room, because the overall total time is longer. So then also the differences when you develop are more visible than rather than if you just track those 500 speed puzzling development. So I think that's good, because sometimes when we feel that we're not developing, it's going to affect our motivation. We start questioning, are we doing things wrong, or was this my full potential? So then we need to just find a way where we can see the development better. And hiring the piece amount and speed puzzling the 1000-piece puzzle is actually a really good solution for this, because then we can see a little bit better, are we developing? And most likely you are. It's just the better you get, it kind of gets slower, because there's much more less room to develop. I think it's like the same with the Alejandro. Can we say, has Alejandro developed? I think yes, he has over the years. But you know, when he's already doing a puzzle in 30 minutes something, it's really hard to see, is there development or is there not? I think there is. And I think if we would now watch Alejandro doing 1000-piece puzzles, we would see development better than what we can see now. I hope you found these tips beneficial for you. Remember always to pick the ones that are for you. Practice one thing at a time. Don't try to take all in and do them at the same time. That usually doesn't work too well. Remember, if something doesn't make sense to you, or like, okay, this doesn't apply to me, just forget it and take some other tip. You think, oh, my tips were trash, then there's the X button. But you know what I mean. Like, this is just me explaining how I see things based on what I learned from sports, as I played in the Finnish national team sports years ago, what I understand from the business, what I understand from studying psychology and stuff. So I'm trying to like give information that it's actually basing on something, instead of that I just feel like this way. But you know, sometimes it just doesn't apply to everybody, because most research is based on like statistics and stuff, and we're all individuals. So always choose the tips that make sense to you. If you have more questions, please comment. Send me a message on Instagram. I'll be happy to help. If you have ideas, what would you like to hear more? Please comment also on that. I know I'm terrible at wrapping up things, and I think this video is going to be super long because I'm just talking, but I hope it's fine. I'd rather go a little bit more in detail than try to be like But anyway, that was all for it. Remember to register for the Worlds, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!